I was standing at the railing of the majestic Aurora, watching the cold, pewter-gray waters of the inside passage churn beneath us as we sailed toward Alaska. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of salt and distance. I was lost in the vastness when Dr. Evelyn Cho appeared at my elbow. The ship's physician was supposed to be enjoying her break, but her face was stark white, her dark eyes flickering nervously toward the panoramic sky deck. Subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments which country you're watching from. Let's see, when my daughter, Lila, and her husband, David, were laughing over frosted emerald glasses. She leaned in close, her voice reduced to a dry, hurried whisper that barely cut through the wind's low howl. "Mr. Callahan, please do not take your Lantis tonight. I'm begging you." My heart, already a seasoned drummer from 18 years of type 2 diabetes, hammered a frantic, new rhythm against my ribs. Before I could process the shock, she pressed something cool and rigid into my palm and walked away quickly, her crisp white coat flapping behind her like a distress signal flag. I stood there immobilized. The small object in my hand was a business card, and on the back, hastily scribbled in blue ink, was a cabin number, D314. My fingers, weathered from decades as a senior architect in Seattle, trembled as I closed them around it. Why would the ship's doctor, a professional sworn to health, tell me to skip my life-saving medication? I've been meticulously managing my diabetes for nearly 2 decades. Missing my long-acting insulin, especially the nighttime dose, could send me into a critical state confusion, dizziness, and potentially a diabetic coma. My mind seized up, racing through possibilities, each more terrifying and illogical than the last. Behind me, I heard Lila's bright, melodic laugh. The same sound that used to echo through our home when she was 7 and discovered she could skip stones on Puget Sound. This morning had started with such uncomplicated joy. I'd woken up in my plush cabin feeling immense gratitude. This 7-day cruise was Lila's gift, a grand celebration of my retirement after 42 years of designing cityscapes. "Dad, you've built half of the city. You deserve this break," she'd insisted 4 months ago, sitting in my kitchen in Bainbridge Island, her hand warm on mine. "Let's finally treat you. David just got a huge commission, and we want to do something absolutely spectacular." David had nodded with fervent agreement, his slick-back brown hair and gleaming wristwatch catching the soft indoor light. "Think of it as a huge thank you, Arthur. You helped us immensely with the seed money for the business launch. This is our way of giving back tenfold." I had been deeply moved. Lila was my only child. Her mother, Genevieve, had passed away suddenly from a pulmonary embolism 7 years prior, and sometimes the silence in my large, empty house felt like a physical weight. Having Lila and David plan this luxurious trip, insisting on covering every single expense, had made me feel utterly cherished, connected, and seen. We'd boarded the ship in Vancouver just 3 days ago. The journey had been everything promised. The breathtaking glaciers, the sight of breaching whales, the refined dinners in the Opal dining hall. But now, standing here with Dr. Cho's stark warning ringing in my ears, a cold, leaden anxiety began to pool in my stomach. I looked down at the card again. Room D314. My cabin was B188, 2 decks above. I glanced back at Lila and David. They were seated close together, their heads bent over David's expensive phone, sharing a conspiratorial smile as they pointed at something on the screen. From this distance, they looked like the perfect, successful, happy young couple. I turned and started toward the elevator bank, my legs feeling suddenly unreliable. The ship rocked gently beneath me. Or was that just my balance failing? I had been feeling strange for the past 2 days, come to think of it, more fatigue than usual, a faint, persistent dizziness. I had dismissed it as sea legs or the adjustment to the coastal air. Now I was beginning to wonder. Dr. Cho answered her cabin door on the first knock, as if she'd been expecting the urgent sound. She pulled me inside quickly, her eyes darting down the narrow corridor before sealing the door shut behind us. Her cabin was the picture of compact, efficient organization. Several heavy medical textbooks lined the built-in shelf, and a secure laptop was open on the narrow desk. She gestured for me to sit on the edge of her single bed, the only comfortable seating besides the hard desk chair. "I'm so sorry for the dramatics, Mr. Callahan," she said, her voice strained and edged with a slight tremble. But I had no other choice. I nearly convinced myself I was mistaken, that I should stay out of passenger affairs, but I can't. I took an oath to do no harm, and if I stay silent, I would be violating that oath completely. "What in the world are you talking about?" My voice came out rough, coated in fear and confusion. She pulled out her personal phone, tapped the screen a few times, and then turned it toward me. It was security camera footage, grainy, slightly angled, clearly showing the ship's small, secure pharmacy dispensary. The timestamp in the corner read, "Yesterday, 3:32 p.m. I watched as a figure in a dark, waterproof jacket approached the service counter. The ship's pharmacist had their back turned, reaching high for something on a top shelf. The figure's hand shot out with startling speed and precision, grabbing a small, labeled item from behind the counter and slipping it instantly into their jacket pocket. The movement was quick, slick, and unervingly practiced. Then, the figure turned slightly toward the camera. It was David. My breath instantly caught in my throat, a painful, physical obstruction. What exactly did he take? I managed to rasp. "Insulin," Dr. Cho confirmed, her eyes filled with deep professional concern. "A vial of Novolog 1 of the rapid-acting types. I only noticed it was missing because I conduct inventory checks twice a week. When I reviewed the security footage, this is what I found. At first, I assumed he might be diabetic too, perhaps embarrassed to ask for a proper prescription while on vacation. But then I did what I had to do. I checked the passenger manifest." She leaned closer. "David Sterling, age 41. No medical conditions listed. No existing prescriptions on file. Nothing. Maybe he simply forgot to list it." I offered, the desperate hope in my voice feeling hollow, even to my own ears, as my mind was already sprinting toward darker, unavoidable conclusions. "That's what I hoped," she conceded. "So, I accessed your confidential medical file, Mr. Callahan. You are on a very precise, dual insulin regimen. Lantus at night for basal support, and Novolog with every meal. Your dosages are meticulously calibrated. I reviewed your blood work from your pre-cruise physical. Your diabetes is, by all accounts, exceptionally well controlled." She paused, taking a slow, steadying breath. But then I had to ask myself, why would your son-in-law, a man with no medical history of diabetes, steal a potent, rapid-acting insulin? And, Mr. Callahan, there is really only one reason someone would steal that medication in that quantity. The tiny cabin suddenly felt stifling, too small, too hot. To harm someone who is diabetic, I finished the sentence for her, the dread chilling my blood. She nodded slowly, solemnly. "An insulin overdose, particularly of a fast-acting type, induces acute hypoglycemia, extreme confusion, debilitating dizziness, loss of consciousness. If the dose is severe enough, it causes seizures, a coma, and irreversible brain death. And here is the terrifying reality, Mr. Callahan. On a ship, in the middle of the Alaskan wilderness, even with a medical facility on board, if someone goes into severe insulin shock while isolated in their cabin, asleep, by the time anyone finds them, dash." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now. I gripped them tightly together, forcing them still. "Why? Why would David want to hurt me?" Dr. Cho hesitated, her gaze avoiding mine for a painful moment. I don't know the personal motives. But this afternoon, I was having a quiet cup of tea in the observatory lounge on Deck 9, tucked into one of the high-backed velvet chairs by the windows. Your daughter and David came in. They sat down in the semi-private booth, right behind me. They never saw me. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "And Mr. Callahan, I overheard them talking." She brought her phone out again, this time opening a voice recording application. I immediately started recording. I know the legal admissibility might be questionable depending on jurisdiction, but I felt I needed something, any evidence at all. "Listen closely." She pressed play. There was ambient noise, the low murmur of ship conversations, the gentle clinking of glassware, the soft lounge jazz. And then, clearly, chillingly, came Lila's voice. The recording continued, and hearing the familiar, beloved voice of my daughter stripped of warmth made my chest physically ache. Lila's voice, clear and cold. "So, we're absolutely sure about the timing tonight?" No hesitation. David's voice, low, careful, and chillingly precise. The calculated dose will be loaded directly into his novolog pen. He takes it religiously right after the nightly news, around 9 p.m., remember? He'll inject it himself, assume he's safe, go to sleep, and by morning, Arthur, it will look like a tragic, unavoidable accident. Diabetic complications. It happens to elderly, cruising passengers all the time. The ship's manifest shows him as high risk already. Lila's voice again, and the sound felt like 1,000 needles piercing me. But what if the ship's doctor or someone suspects foul play? What if there's an investigation? David, they won't. I've researched this to the point of obsession. Insulin overdoses perfectly mimic natural diabetic emergencies. The ship's doctor will log it as an unfortunate but expected complication of his condition. Will be in international waters beyond the typical reach of immediate investigation. They will want to handle it quietly, respectfully, and without attracting negative media attention. We will be the heartbroken daughter and son-in-law, flying his body back to Seattle. We'll arrange a moving funeral, and then Lila finished the thought, her tone shifting from anxiety to anticipation. Then the insurance pays out. $2 million from the life policy, plus the assets, the house, the investment portfolio, everything. David, sounding utterly secure. Exactly. Close to $3.5 million in liquid value. And that will finally free us. Free of the crushing anxiety about our finances. Free of that colossal 7-figure mortgage hanging over our heads. Free of having to constantly pretend we enjoy spending time with your overly careful, boring father. The recording continued for another agonizing minute, but I could no longer process the words. The sound was drowned out by a deafening roar in my ears. My daughter, my sweet Lila, the little girl who used to fall asleep in the crook of my arm while I read her stories about explorers, the sensitive teenager who wept inconsolably when her first serious boyfriend moved away, the woman who held my hand at Genevieve's funeral and whispered, "We're going to be okay, Dad. We still have each other." She wanted me dead. Dr. Cho mercifully stopped the recording. The silence in the small cabin was not quiet. It was deafening, suffocating. "Mr. Callahan, I am devastated for you," she said, her voice strained with genuine sorrow. "I know this must be soul-crushing, but you absolutely needed to know. You have to protect yourself right now." I tried to speak, but my throat was a dried knot. I swallowed hard, forcing the words out. "What do I do? What is the next step?" Dr. Cho immediately moved into professional medical mode, her focus sharp. "First, you must not take any insulin that you haven't personally verified and that hasn't been dispensed directly from the medical bay. I will provide you with a fresh, secure supply right now. Use only that. Second, we need to preserve this evidence. I will upload this voice recording and the pharmacy security footage to a secure, off-ship server. Third, we need to involve the ship's hierarchy, the captain and the head of security. But, Mr. Callahan, I must be completely honest with you. This will be an uphill battle. What I did recording their private conversation without explicit consent might not hold up legally, depending on which jurisdiction claims the crime. And they are your family. The accusation alone, even if we were wrong, would destroy your relationship with Lila. She already destroyed our relationship," I said, the bitterness a metallic taste on my tongue. She just hadn't sent the final notice yet. The next few hours were the longest, most surreal period of my entire life. Dr. Cho contacted Captain Elias Winter, a stern, seasoned Norwegian man in his late 50s, who listened to our recounting of the events with steadily increasing gravity. He immediately called his head of security, Marcus Matt Kowalski, a former Vancouver police detective, a huge man with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. We all gathered in the captain's spacious, locked quarters. "This is attempted murder, fraud, and theft of medical supplies," Captain Winter stated, his accent thick with concern. But Dr. Cho is correct. The evidence is complex. The recording may be inadmissible. The security footage proves theft, yes, but not the specific intent to kill. A skilled defense lawyer could easily argue David was merely confused or made a mistake with the medication. We need more. What if we set up a controlled sting? Kowalski suggested, his voice low and tactical. Mr. Callahan, do you have any access, even brief, to your daughter's or son-in-law's devices or cabin? I thought hard. Lila is sentimental. She always leaves her old leather-bound journal and her small jewelry box on the vanity. When we go to dinner, she doesn't trust the safe for personal items. They lock the door, but I have a key. David insisted I have one. He said, for emergencies. The painful irony of that statement was not lost on any of us. And they are planning to execute this plan tonight? Kowalski asked, his sharp eyes fixed on me. According to the recording, I confirmed, my voice steady now, driven by a cold, protective rage. They plan to tamper with my insulin supply before we sit down for dinner. Kowalski nodded slowly. Understood. Here is our plan. We need to catch them red-handed in the act of tampering. Mr. Callahan, you will proceed with your evening as normal. Dr. Cho will swap out your current insulin supply for a placebo-A sterile saline solution, clearly marked for our purposes, so if they tamper with it, your life will not be in danger. Meanwhile, I will install a micro camera in your cabin, focused precisely on where you keep your medical bag. We'll capture them physically making the switch. That footage, combined with the voice recording and the initial theft footage, will be more than enough to hold them until we dock in Juneau and hand them over to federal authorities. My stomach churned violently. I have to act normal. I have to sit through dinner with them, knowing what they are planning to do to me. Dr. Cho placed a firm, grounding hand on my arm. Mr. Callahan, can you do this? I thought about Genevieve, my late wife, about the honest, good life we had built together, and about the daughter I truly believed I had raised. Yes, I said, the word a hard, cold pebble. I can do it. They executed the preparation plan, while Lila and David were at the afternoon art and wine pairing event on Deck 10. Kowalski, the security chief, was incredibly precise. He installed a tiny camera disguised as a subtle air vent cover high in the corner of my cabin, angled perfectly at the small, insulated medical bag where I meticulously kept my diabetic supplies. Dr. Cho, working with the calm speed of a seasoned professional, meticulously switched out every single vial and pen of my original Novolog and Lantus insulin with identical-looking pens containing only sterile saline solution. She carefully documented and labeled the original, potent vials as crucial evidence. Then, we all separated, agreeing to regroup in the captain's quarters at 6 a.m. the following morning to review the evidence and finalize the action plan. At precisely 6:30 p.m., I met Lila and David at the entrance to the Opal dining hall. I was wearing my best dark suit, a charcoal gray I knew Genevieve had loved, and the smile I affixed to my face felt stiff, fragile, and certain to crack at any moment. Lila looked stunning. She wore a deep emerald green dress that complemented her eyes, her hair swept up in an elegant style. David was in a bespoke navy suit, his hand resting on her waist in a proprietary, familiar gesture. They looked exactly like any other blissfully happy, successful young couple celebrating a special milestone with a beloved elderly parent. "Dad, you look wonderful," Lila said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. I had to exert every ounce of my will not to flinch from her touch. "You seemed a little worn out earlier. Just needed a solid hour of rest, sweetie," I said, my voice sounding miraculously steady and warm. "You know how it is at my age. The sea air is surprisingly tiring." David, ever the gentleman, pulled out my heavy velvet chair. "Sit, Robert. Tonight, we celebrate." We were seated at a prime table with a panoramic window view of the darkening Alaskan coastline. He immediately ordered a bottle of expensive, vintage French champagne, raising his glass the moment it was poured. "To family," David announced, his eyes glittering. "To retirement. And to a new, exciting chapter." I accepted the glass, the crystal cool against my palm, raised it when they did, and echoed the toast to family. The word was bitter, tasting exactly like ash and shattered memories on my tongue. Dinner was a meticulously prepared surf and turf filet mignon and giant Alaskan king crab legs beautifully presented. Certainly delicious. I barely registered the flavor. My entire focus was on them. I watched Lila laugh a bright, unrestrained sound at David's calculated jokes. I watched them hold hands across the vast, white tablecloth. I watched David excuse himself halfway through the meal, saying he needed to make an urgent call regarding his latest commission. He was gone for precisely 12 minutes and 45 seconds. I know because I timed it, my watch ticking off each second with a deafening, internal count, like a countdown to the moment of betrayal. When he returned, he seemed visibly more relaxed, almost buoyant, an air of quiet, confident triumph radiating from him. He immediately ordered a second bottle of champagne, insisting we splurge. Lila's eyes were unusually bright, excited, and slightly reckless. They thought they had done it. They believed that, by tomorrow morning, I would be found dead, and they would be $3.5 million richer, their financial burdens magically erased. After the strained but outwardly cheerful dinner, David suggested we go up to the sun deck to watch the last sliver of the sunset disappear below the horizon. We stood at the railing, the three of us, watching the spectacular sky shifting from burnt orange to deep magenta over the frigid, dark water. "Isn't this absolutely perfect, Dad?" Lila said, leaning in to rest her head affectionately against my shoulder. "I am so incredibly glad we insisted on this trip." "Me too, honey," I managed to reply. And in a deep, twisted way, I did mean it. If we hadn't taken this trip, if Dr. Cho hadn't been so brave, I might never have known. I might have simply died in my sleep 6 months from now, or a year from now, and never understood that the daughter I raised had coldly engineered my death for money. At 8:45 p.m., I excused myself, claiming I was utterly exhausted from the sea air and the champagne. Lila hugged me tightly, a gesture I now perceived as the final, agonizing farewell from a woman I thought I knew. "Sleep soundly, Dad. We'll see you at breakfast. Don't worry about a thing." "Sweet dreams, Robert," David added, his smile wide, empty, and completely devoid of soul. I walked back to my cabin, my heart pounding so loudly I worried the sound could be heard in the hallway. The surveillance camera was completely invisible unless you knew precisely where to look. I went through my absolute normal nightly routine, changed into my flannel pajamas, meticulously brushed my teeth, and checked the clock. At exactly 9:02 p.m., I took out my novolog pen, the one that now contained only sterile saline, and deliberately gave myself the injection I would take every night. Then, I climbed into my bed, turned off the lights, and waited in the profound darkness. I did not sleep. I lay there, listening to the monotonous, deep hum of the ship's powerful engines, the faint, distant sound of music from one of the lower lounges. I thought about Lila as a baby, how she used to instinctively wrap her tiny hand around my index finger. I thought about teaching her to ride her bicycle on the gravel path of our old home, about watching her graduate from university, and about walking her down the aisle 3 years ago when she married David. Had she already been planning this then? Or had David slowly, methodically poisoned her mind after their disastrous real estate ventures collapsed and the crushing weight of their credit card debt mounted up, totaling close to $750,000? My phone vibrated silently at 11:56 p.m. A text message from Kowalski, the head of security. "Got it. Clear footage. Meet in captain's quarters at 6 a.m. Protocol Delta." I closed my eyes then, the immediate danger having passed, and finally slept a fitful, shallow sleep of exhaustion and immense pain until the first light of dawn. At exactly 6 a.m., I slipped out of my cabin, the sense of dread mixed with cold determination propelling me forward. I made my way through the quiet ship corridors to the captain's private quarters. Everyone was already there. Captain Vinter, looking grim. Kowalski, the head of security, who gave me a slight, reassuring nod. Dr. Cho, her face pale but resolute, and 2 uniformed ship security officers I hadn't met before, standing sentinel near the door. Kowalski had his secure laptop open on the large desk, queued up to the video footage taken inside my cabin. "You need to see this, Mr. Callahan," he said quietly, his voice neutral and professional. I watched the screen. The timestamp on the footage read 7:58 p.m., right in the middle of our disastrous dinner. The cabin door opened silently, and David entered. He moved with a swift, practiced stealth that horrified me. He didn't just look around. He scanned the room, a professional in a hurry. He went straight to my medical bag. He unzipped it, pulled out my Novolog pen, quickly examined the dosage indicator, and then reached into his suit jacket pocket. He withdrew another pen, one that looked absolutely identical in every way. He made the switch quickly, efficiently, and then replaced the zippered bag exactly as he had found it. The whole calculated act took no more than 93 seconds. He was a ghost, leaving no trace. "We have already tested the insulin he left," Dr. Cho confirmed, her jaw tight. "It is indeed Novolog, Mr. Callahan, but analysis shows it is concentrated to approximately 5 times your normal, safe concentration. If you had injected that, you would have been in an irreversible coma within the hour, likely deceased before dawn." The room tilted violently around me. I gripped the edge of the captain's heavy oak desk to steady myself. The stark reality of how close I had come to death at the hand of my daughter and her husband was finally sinking in. "What happens now?" I whispered, my throat dry. Captain Vinter's face was solemn and grave. "We dock in Juneau, Alaska, in approximately 3.5 hours. I have already contacted the Alaska State Troopers and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. Attempted murder involving U.S. citizens crossing international lines demands federal jurisdiction. They will be waiting on the dock. We will effect the arrest of Mr. Sterling and Ms. Callahan immediately upon arrival." A heavy silence fell. My gaze drifted to the window, where the first hint of Alaskan mountains was visible. "Can I?" I swallowed hard, the request almost impossible to voice. "Can I talk to her first?" "To Lila." Kowalski frowned instantly. "That is strongly not advisable, Mr. Callahan. You should not engage them before they are in custody. It is a severe security risk, and you're the victim." "Please," I insisted, the desperation overriding my fear. "I need to know why. I need to hear it from her. I need that closure to survive this." Kowalski and Captain Vinter exchanged a long, meaningful look. Finally, the captain sighed and nodded, his compassion overriding protocol. "We will bring them here together, Mr. Callahan, with 2 security officers present and fully ready," Captain Vinter conceded. "But you must prepare yourself. This will be the hardest conversation of your entire life." About 20 minutes later, Lila and David were escorted into the captain's quarters. They were both looking confused, irritated, and half asleep, clearly annoyed at being roused and detained so early in the morning. Lila was in yoga pants and a thick, oversized ship sweatshirt, her hair pulled back carelessly. David wore jeans and a thin jacket. They looked utterly normal, utterly innocent. "Dad, what in the world is going on?" Lila asked, her face etched with genuine confusion when she saw me standing there. Captain Vinter said there was some kind of severe emergency. I looked at my daughter. I truly looked at her, searching desperately for any trace of the little girl I had raised, the one who loved me, the one who was honest somewhere deep in this woman's face. "Why, Lila?" I asked, the question shaking me to the core. She blinked rapidly. "Why? Why what, Dad? What are you talking about? Why did you and David decide to kill me?" The color instantly drained from her face, leaving a sickly white pallor. David's expression, by contrast, went carefully, dangerously blank. "Dad," she started, her voice suddenly high and falsely concerned. "What are you saying? Are you feeling unwell? Have you been drinking this early?" "Don't," I ordered, the word a ragged tear in my throat. "Don't lie to me anymore. It's over. I know everything. The stolen Novolog, the calculated plan, the fact that Dr. Cho heard your conversation, and the fact that the cameras caught David tampering with my medication. We have all the evidence. It's done." For a long, agonizing moment, the silence was absolute. David remained statue still, calculating his options. Then, Lila's face crumbled, and I held a desperate, foolish hope that maybe, just maybe, she would break down, apologize, and claim it was a terrible, horrible mistake. Instead, she laughed. It was a terrible, bitter, sound raw with anger, a sound I had never in my life heard escape her lips. All pretense, all warmth, all love was instantly stripped away. You want to know why? Her voice was sharp, cutting. Because you were supposed to help us, Dad. You were supposed to help us. Lila repeated, her voice rising to a furious, desperate shout. When Mom died, she left you everything. That massive house on Bainbridge Island is worth well over $2 million now. You have her life insurance payout, your substantial architect pension, your investments. You are sitting on a net worth of at least $4 million while David and I are drowning in debt and scrambling to keep our business afloat. I did help you with the initial launch, I said, utterly staggered, trying to keep my voice from trembling. I gave you $200,000 in seed money. I thought that was being supportive. $200,000? She laughed again, a harsh, dismissive sound that was worse than any scream. That was nothing. We needed real capital. Our mortgage is killing us. The investment market collapsed last quarter, and we are facing imminent bankruptcy. We need liquidity, Dad. But you just sit alone in that giant, empty house, hoarding your wealth while your only daughter suffers. I didn't know you were struggling like this. I countered, the pain in my voice raw. You never once said a word. You told me the architecture firm was doing brilliantly. Because we have pride, Dad. We weren't going to beg you for money like children. Lila spat out the words, her eyes blazing with genuine resentment. But then David pointed out the only way we wouldn't have to beg was if you were simply gone. The house, the investments, the insurance, it all comes to me. We could have started over. We could have lived the life we deserve. David finally broke his silence, stepping forward, his face completely cold and calculating now that the mask had finally been discarded. You are old, Arthur. You're diabetic. You could have gone at any time naturally, and we merely accelerated the process. Frankly, you should be thanking us for planning to make it painless and respectful. A tragic end to a wonderful trip. The captain gave a sharp, immediate signal. The security officers instantly moved in, one for Lila and one for David, placing cold steel handcuffs on their wrists. Lila fought back, instantly dissolving into desperate, ugly tears. She screamed, struggling, against the officer. Dad, please, don't do this. We are family. You can't send me to federal prison. Dad, please. I turned my back instantly, unable to watch the horrifying spectacle of my daughter's final betrayal. I don't have a daughter, I said quietly, the words barely audible, spoken to the empty wall. My daughter died a long time ago. I just didn't realize it until now. They were forcibly escorted away, their shouts, sobs, and David's sharp, low protests fading quickly down the ship corridor. Captain Vinter placed a heavy, sympathetic hand on my shoulder. Mr. Callahan, I am truly sorry you had to endure that profound pain. What happens now? I asked, completely spent. We dock in Juneau in just under 2 hours, the captain confirmed. They will be immediately arrested and charged by the FBI with attempted murder, theft, fraud, and conspiracy. The evidence is irrefutable. Dr. Cho's testimony, the highly effective security footage of the tampering, the voice recording, and the analyzed, concentrated insulin. They will be taken into federal custody to face trial. And they did face trial. 8 months later, I sat rigidly in a courtroom in Seattle, Washington. The case had been strategically transferred there since the conspiracy had originated and the planning had taken place on U.S. soil. I listened numbly as the prosecution detailed how Lila and David had been meticulously planning my murder for well over a year. They had researched insulin, practiced switching medication pens, and even forged sensitive documents to try and solidify themselves as primary beneficiaries on financial accounts I didn't even know they had located. The defense tried every angle, arguing that they never actually completed the act, that no physical harm had occurred to me, and that the entire scheme was merely a reckless, drunken fantasy. But the mountain of evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. David Sterling was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. Lila Callahan, as the primary beneficiary, the initial instigator of the murder plot, and the closer relative, received 13 years. I watched them both being led away in handcuffs. Lila was hysterical, crying uncontrollably. David was stony-faced, giving me one last cold, hard stare. Lila looked at me then, pleading one last time. I looked back, feeling nothing but a profound, aching emptiness where love used to reside. After the conclusion of the trial, I found that the emotional and physical energy required to simply be in the courtroom had completely depleted me. The truth, however painful, had finally been exposed, and justice in the cold, judicial sense had been served. But the feeling of relief was entirely overshadowed by a crushing, profound loss. I didn't hesitate. I sold the house in Bainbridge Island. The house, a sprawling, beautiful structure overlooking the water that I had designed myself and shared with Genevieve for 25 years, was now poisoned by too many memories, both the genuinely good ones and the recent, horrifying ones. Every corner of that space echoed with the false laughter and cold calculations I had overheard. I relocated to a much smaller, contemporary condo in Kitsap Peninsula, closer to the vibrancy of the water and with a direct ferry line back to Seattle, should I need it. It was a space I could make new, untainted memories in. I found myself with an immense amount of time and a deep, unexpected need to transform my personal pain into something productive, something that could actually help others. I began to volunteer intensely. 4 days a week, I dedicate my time at the Puget Sound Elder Advocacy and Prevention Center. I don't just answer phones or file papers. I share my story. I tell my tale to other seniors, to community groups, and to adult children who are concerned about their siblings or cousins. I teach them the subtle, insidious warning signs of financial elder abuse, the sudden, acute interest in one's will or estate documents, the constant, subtle pressure to co-sign loans or switch banking accounts, the abrupt attempts to limit an older person's social contacts outside the family, and in my horrific case, the calculated, sudden attempt to eliminate the victim entirely for a massive financial payout, which the court estimated to be around $4 million in total assets and insurance. I become meticulous and cautious in my personal life. I check my secure investment accounts weekly. I keep all my sensitive legal documents, my updated will, my power of attorney, and my financial records in a secured lockbox at my trusted lawyer's office, never at home, and I recommend the same for everyone I speak to. I wrote a new, legally ironclad will that explicitly leaves 100% of my remaining estate to charity, specifically funding organizations dedicated to protecting seniors and preventing financial elder abuse. This final decision gave me a quiet sense of control and peace. And perhaps the most crucial lesson I have learned to trust my instincts. If a relationship feels wrong, if a seemingly kind action feels calculating, if there's a persistent cold doubt in your gut, it probably is something you need to address. Ignoring that feeling almost cost me my life. Dr. Evelyn Cho and I still exchange emails occasionally. She eventually left the demanding, isolating world of cruise ship medicine and now runs a bustling primary care clinic in Vancouver, British Columbia. She saved my life by simply trusting her deep professional instinct, by being brave enough to risk her career and her standing to issue a warning to a perfect stranger. I will never, for the remainder of my life, be able to fully repay her for her courage. People sometimes ask me if I miss Lila, or if I ever manage to think about the concept of forgiveness. The truth is stark. I miss the daughter I genuinely thought I had. I miss the small, loving girl who looked up at me with total adoration. But that specific person, that genuine, loving daughter, either never fully existed or she sadly died somewhere along the way, replaced by a cold, calculating stranger who valued $3.5 million in assets far more than. She valued human life. You cannot, I have learned, truly forgive someone who is not genuinely sorry, someone who would, given the exact same circumstance and opportunity, still choose to kill you for money. The lack of remorse, the cold entitlement she showed in that captain's quarters stripped away the very possibility of reconciliation. I am 65 years old now. I take my Lantus and Novolog diligently every day, but only from clearly marked, tamper-proof vials that I keep secured under lock and key in a specific safe that only I know the combination to. I live simply, carefully, guarding both my health and my resources. And every single time I speak to a senior who expresses worry about a family member's sudden, keen interest in their finances, every time I help someone else recognize the very real signs of financial and familial abuse, I feel like something profoundly good has been salvaged from all that immense, crushing pain. Genevieve, my wife, used to have a simple, steadfast belief that everything happens for a reason. I am no longer certain I believe that anymore. But I do now believe that we get to choose what we do with the agonizing pain inflicted upon us. We can let it destroy us, leaving us cynical, isolated, and bitter. Or we can choose to use it, harness its power, and turn it into a shield to protect others. I chose the latter. And every single person I help, every family crisis I potentially avert, every life I help secure, feels like a small, hard-won victory over the daughter and son-in-law who try to murder me for my money. That ultimately is all any of us can do in the face of profound betrayal. Survive, heal the scars, and try to make sure those scars ultimately serve some greater, protective purpose beyond simply reminding us that we bled.